And I would like to introduce our next speaker. It's Malwine Steinbock. She is founder and director of Food Republik. Before that, she worked for the Basque Culinary Center, where she was director of Imagine Food Tech. So quite interesting. And she was co-founder of Next Chef and innovation consultants for an insurance company that's alive. So today she travels around the world looking for beverage innovation at international trade fairs like this one and analyzing changing consumer behavior. We are very much looking forward to what you have to say. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Anja. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming in this mid-afternoon. So I want to invite you today to think about an opportunity, to think about spritz and flavored wine, not as a beverage, but really as a platform for innovation in the alcohol and non-alcoholic space. I don't have a clicker, I just realized. Yes, that's the clicker. Perfect, thank you. So, I'm founder of Food Republik. We're a food innovation agency specialized in food and beverage. And we specialize in food scouting. We travel the world to all major trade shows, some of the major trade shows looking for trends, inspiration, and new product developments. So all the challenges that you're facing today in your business, this is also happening to companies all around the world. So we speak to them and find out how they're answering these questions. And this is how we have analyzed the non-alcoholic beverage space, the no and low space, since 2022. And we have found that there are tons of opportunities to innovate, tons of opportunities to create new beverages. And this is just a little summary of some of the opportunities we have looked into. So today we are going to talk about spritz. And the first part, I want to ask you for your opinion. If you could scan this QR code and just type one word, it will ask you for 3 words, but 1 word is fine. You can type 2 or 3, what you associate with spritz. A feeling, a moment, being outside, Mediterranean, BB. What is BB? Summer, refreshing, happy. So basically what you will see, it's much more than a beverage. It's really a moment, it's a lifestyle, it's a feeling that you can associate with it. You're happy, you're outside, you're celebrating, you're by the beach. In holidays, maybe it's overrated. So let's move on with the presentation. But definitely it's fun and it's summer. So, how it all started? It actually started with the Austrian Empire expanding into northern Italy in the 19th century. And the people from the Austrian government moving into northern Italy, they found the wine really strong, so they asked the bartenders to spritz it, to just add a splash of water. So it was a way to dilute down the alcohol content. And I think this is the first good tip when you think about spritzing something. So this really opens up the concept spritz to much more than just the Aperol spritz that we've seen before. As you all shared, it's really about a moment, it's about a lifestyle, it's about being outside, it's about this Mediterranean feeling, like almost a mini vacation in the middle of the day. And this is really what made spritz so popular, and why has it grown double-digit in the past 10, 15 years? It's really about the culture, the aperitivo culture, and also because new generations that are much more thoughtful about what kind of alcohol they consume, it really fits into a moderation lifestyle. It's a little bit lower alcohol, like the gin and tonic. It's almost becoming like the default cocktail when you go out. Before, between 2028 and 2018, it was maybe a gin and tonic that you would order more. Now it's much more spritz. It's daytime drinking. And actually, I'm moving over there. And when we look at all the data related to alcohol consumption, spritz it's all about double-digit growth. So the aperitivo market is growing, spritz is growing double-digit. Prosecco exports are up 129% between 2017 and 2025. So there's a lot of positive signs in the spritz culture. Also, I want to paint a picture for you how alcohol alternatives are really evolving. Alcohol is evolving into more low alcoholic versions, like the 20%, the 1/4 alcohol versions. Then the RTDs are naturally low in alcohol when they're already pre-mixed. They're between 5 and 7%. Then we have the non-alcoholic versions of it. So the first step from a gin and tonic, we move into a non-alcoholic gin and tonic. But not only that, it's not only the mocktail, which I kind of feel it sounds fake, mocktail. I wouldn't go that way, but that's a personal opinion. And then there is the craft version of the cocktail. So something more genuine, something more authentic, built from scratch, not only de-alcoholizing the version that you know, but then there's a new segment. The functional segment is actually really growing. So adding health benefits, adding some relaxing ingredients, something that uplifts you. So emulating the effect of alcohol, but without alcohols, much more with nootropics and adaptogens. We will see some examples later. So this is really how we see the alcoholic space evolving into something more functional. And the same really applies also to spritz. So you have already a naturally low alcohol version of the ready to drink. Then you have the non-alcoholic version. I put a lot of emphasis always in this company-ish. You will see it later. And then towards the health supporting or more functional version where you're adding some nootropics to have like this uplifting feeling. So, spritz as an innovation platform. From RTD over non-alcoholic versions, innovation with flavors, wine-based, cocktail-based, functional, and then also bitter sodas. This will guide you now through my presentation with a lot of examples that we have seen at trade shows and shelves around the world. And the first example I think is really interesting. Spritz, so it's a juice. But they are riding on the spritz wave with their apple juice and rhubarb schorle. We have a kombucha spritz from Belvoir Farm. They do a lot of mixers. They have the bitter orange spritz. And then we see a comeback of old Mediterranean bitters as aperitivo. So Crodini was actually born in 1915 in Italy. It's a non-alcoholic bitter. And we have tons of examples. Cinzano has a comeback. Kini is one of the most sold bitters. Actually, they come from Malta, but their main market is Australia. Emilio, you can see the nostalgic look of a premium soft drink. Bitter Cas is owned by PepsiCo, is having a huge comeback in Spain, and then Crodino that I already have mentioned. So, first step to move into this growing space is think about an RTD version. So you don't need any skills. You know that one of the main challenges in the bars today is that they don't have any skilled bartenders. So make it easy to mix a spritz, to have a base for it. It can be alcoholic, like the Aperol one. It can be single serve in a can, in a bottle. The Miro spritz, it's actually a vermouth company, also from northern Spain. And then you can have the alcohol-free version. And it doesn't need to be red. It can also be yellow. The next segment we are looking into are the 0 point, the non-alcoholic versions of the spritz. So you have Ish. This is a Danish company, Ish. And they are so great in emulating the flavor. I think it's the spritz that I've had that resembles the most the original version. It's really great. They redid all the classic cocktails, Paloma, gin and tonics, but their spritz is really exceptionally great. Lente Rosa is a wine company that are moving into the ready-to-drink spritz space. Galvania, maybe you know them. They are creating premium soft drinks. They have the cola, the Fanta, the Sprite, all in a healthier version, the tonic water. So they're moving into all the most popular beverages and doing a natural version of it. And even Schweppes has launched last year, a virgin orange spritz. So, and then this is it.
So it doesn't matter, but I can la experiencia de beber pero sin alcohol.
Well, this is just like a little clip we had from Gulf Food last year. So recreating the experience, no? How can you have it on tap? Really nice. Then talking about food service. What kind of mixes can you provide? Non-alcoholic mixes that use the color, the bitter, the botanicals, the gentian root to recreate a good base for non-alcoholic spritz. And the great thing about it is you can mix it with tonic water, but you can also mix it with Prosecco, so that you have even a lower version of the Aperol spritz without the need for the Aperol. Wine spritzes. So we're not only talking about Aperol spritz, but really also about wine spritzes here, as the whole story actually started. So here I want to show you a few examples of some major wine companies actually moving into the flavored wine ready-to-drink space. As you have here, Cordornio from Catalonia. They are probably here. So the bubbly spritz with lime and lemon ginger, the elderflower, a really popular craft recipe as well, paired with Riesling. The spritz, this is actually paired with cucumber, really nice and fresh, and then you have again an elderflower and cucumber white wine spritzer. So new ways to drink wine, very convenient, very on the go, in the park, at a festival, just made for the new generation. And here I want to offer something that is actually something very something that we see a lot in Spain. I don't know in your country, so I'm German, but I've lived in Spain for many, many years. And we call this canned traditions, because there are a lot of aperitivos, a lot of spritzes that you would normally have in a bar at a festival, and they are being canned right now with a lot of success, actually. So you have the Ribujito, this is Fino cherry, Manzanilla cherry with Sprite. So they can it. Rojito, this is a Tinto de Verano. So a spritz doesn't need to have a white wine base. You can also have a red wine base and not paired with soda water, but with an orange soda or a lemon soda. Here, Vermutino is actually a brand from the United States, but they are spritzing the vermouth and then an orange spritz that's made from red wine. And if you want to try one, you can actually go to Don Simon. I don't know if you've seen Garcia Carrion. They are making this red wine spritz, and they just told me this morning that their 0.0 is in sales at the same level as the alcoholic version already. So also good tip to go, the non-alcoholic and the low alcoholic version at the same time. New flavors. Who isn't in love with lemon? It's fresh, it's bright, it's trending in all categories, in cookies and ice cream, and obviously also in beverages. So probably walking around only this morning, I've seen at least 3 or 4 limoncello spritz. But it's not only limoncello spritz, it's also other flavors. So obviously the Hugo spritz, the sake spritz, the limoncello spritz, the Lillet. So you can have different versions, like different flavors in the spritz and in the spritz moment. And what I think is really interesting is Marks and Spencer's, because they have the whole range. I'm only showing the limoncello spritz, but they have the Aperol spritz, they have the sake spritz, and they have the Hugo spritz. So they really are offering the whole range of different flavored spritz versions. And just for the sake of saying that limoncello is really trending, some of the products that we have seen lately in that space, plus all the ones that you can try here at the show. But it's not only about spritzing different flavored wines and the Aperol, the bitters, but you can also spritz a cocktail, actually. How can you dilute down a margarita, a paloma, anything, really? So we already see this in the can space, but if you go on Instagram or go on the internet, you will find all the cocktails in their spritz version, because it's a way to dilute down the alcohol, as I was mentioning in the beginning of the presentation. So you can have a Negroni spritz, even Absolut is doing the strawberry spritz. So this is non-alcoholic, these two are actually alcoholic. The vodka spritz with strawberry and lemongrass, and then very interestingly, Little Saint's Negroni spritz also has CBD in it. So it relaxes you. No alcohol, but another ingredient, a functional ingredient that will relax you. So since hard seltzer never really worked in Europe, I kind of find that this spritz is a much more European way to approach a non-alcoholic or a low-alcoholic sparkling beverage. And now we're moving into the craft cocktail or the craft spritz scene. So how can you actually not de-alcoholize the version, but how can you build it from the ground up? A flavor profile that is similar to the original spritz, but it's not trying to copy it. So here we have Gia. That's a video, actually. I don't know if it's going to play here. So Gia is so it's really about recreating an authentic experience. It's not about mocking or anything fake. It's really about, yeah, a genuine experience that is created from botanicals, from bitters, from natural ingredients. And then this brand was born in 2020 and has been really at the forefront of the sober curious movement in the US, and is one of the most widely distributed brands. So they started with the aperitif, so just the mixer for the bars that you were seeing in the video that was being prepared really as a high-end cocktail. Then they moved into the canned version of the spritzer, but they didn't only stick to the original bitter one. They also launched a sumac one, a yuzu one, and an elderflower one, and then their last launch was actually a large ready-to-drink version of the cocktail. But they're not the only ones really operating in this authentic from ground up craft space. So you have Ever Spritz, that's really all about like bringing this Mediterranean feeling to a little can and also to bottles. Curious Number 4, and the whole range of spirit makers or beverage makers that are moving into the craft spritz space. And then I want to present you an incredible success story from the US. This is Megan, and this is her co-founder, the pop star Kate Perry, and together they have launched this one.
Is a non-alcoholic sparkling aperitif that is infused with relaxing adaptogens, and we launched in 2022. My name is Morgan McLaughlin. I'm the co-founder and the creator, and my co-founder is actually Katy Perry, the pop star. The brand has been going very, very well here in the United States. The majority of our products are sort of one-for-one alcohol replacements. And we're actually just launching this subline called Social Spritz. The concept is it's still an alcohol replacement, but it's a little lighter. It's more for daytime drinking by the pool, in more casual situations. These are for people who don't want to get drunk, but like the taste of alcohol.
So a very interesting case, because they are not only doing the non-alcoholic version, but they're, as she was saying, adding adaptogens like L-theanine, which is like a little, provides you with a little bit of energy, reishi, and magnesium to it to relax you as well. Recess Mood is one of the fastest growing calm and relaxation beverages in the US. They have their soft drinks based on magnesium, and they have also launched a range of alcohol alternatives where obviously they have the spritz. And then Keen Euphorics, you can deduct it from the name, also has adaptogens and functional ingredients that actually uplift you, relax you, and give you like a nice feeling after having it. But it goes even further. Non-alcoholic seaside spritz, adaptogens, nootropics, kind of the keyword in the US. Then you have with ashwagandha that relaxes you. It's good for stress. With functional mushrooms, a functional mocktail based on reishi and on lion's mane mushroom. But in the US, as you know, cannabis has been legalized. So you will find a whole section of THC-infused beverages that allow you to get like a nice relaxed feeling without the alcohol. And in this case, they're even doing the Aperol flavor, which I found really interesting. And you can find, lots of these THC-infused beverages in New York, in California, where it's, for instance, legal. It tastes like an spritz. Tastes like a spritz. So, why is spritz your next opportunity? It's really not about the Aperol spritz only. It's really about how to create a moderate alcohol drink that fits a lifestyle, that fits a moment, that gives you like this feeling of a little vacation in between work and dinner time. It's all made for daytime drinking. It's great, looks great on Instagram and TikTok. It's very shiny. It's very socially accepted to have this kind of alcohol. And now I want to give you six keys if you want to incorporate spritz in your next innovation. So first of all, think about the ritual where it fits in. It's really about the moment. It's really about the lifestyle that you want to fit. People are looking to enhance their lives every day, so it needs something that really uplifts them. Think about the alcohol level that you want to provide. Is it low? Is it no? Or is it even functional? And many of the brands today is one of the one that I just showed you. It's really about having like the non-alcoholic and the low alcoholic versions, so you can have it both. It's really about adult refreshment. It's about a sophisticated taste. It's bitter is really going mainstream. The citrusy flavors are really popular. You've seen the limoncello and everything that comes with the ice, and it melts, and it's really light and refreshing. The RTD, make it RTD, make it really easy to consume, either as a single serve or also for the bars, have like the large version so you can drink it. Make it Instagrammable. Make it nice, beautiful, have a nice glass, a nice design, a nice branding. We saw in some of the presentations earlier that people really want to have drinks that speak about them. And then spritz anything. You can spritz a cocktail, you can spritz a juice, you can spritz a tea, you can spritz whatever you like, just to dilute down the alcohol or to create an authentic from the ground up experience. So that was my presentation for today. Thank you very much. I invite you to sign up for our newsletter. We will send up some information about the presentation, and please, feel free to reach out and ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was inspiring, colorful, and full of new products. So, any question from the audience? Don't be shy. Ask us something. You have now the chance. Okay, it was a long day. So, thank you very much.
We have a
Yes, we have a question. Hi. We have a question. Please.
I'm Nelson from Hong Kong, Wine Lux magazine. So we write about wine in Hong Kong. So I would like to know what do you see the trend in Asia market? Because I think you have some example from US. And I see the trend in Hong Kong now is also non-alcohol and also cocktails. It's really popular. But what do you think, you're just talking about this trend in Asia market, and any idea about that?
That's a very good question. So my experience in Asia is I went to Theis last year to start exploring the region a little bit further. What I see is that they're very innovative, taking European concepts and then developing their local version of it. So I'm sure Mediterranean lifestyle is trending all around the world, Mediterranean food, drinks. So I'm sure that this will somehow fit, or you will find a way to fit it in your culture. Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? So, thank you very much. It was really inspiring. So, we are coming to our next speaker. So, if we look about the most talked innovations in the world of non-alcoholic drinks, it's Proxies. For many people drinking de-alcoholized wine, it's almost, but not quite, the real thing. So, there's a door open for new drinks, and Proxies are exactly the category that moves into this door, into this room. So they are increasingly finding their places in top restaurants, in online retail, and consumers are willing to spend real money on them. Our next speaker is Theis Søndergaard. He is a Danish entrepreneur, co-founder of Vivino, and now founder of Dry Boots, a community for consumers of non-alcoholic beverages. So, Theis, are Proxies becoming the real non-alcoholic alternative? Please tell us.
Thank you. Well, let's see. Well, thank you very much. I'll just find the clicker. Can you put on the presentation? Yes, thank you. All right. So, hello. Thank you for being here. It's late in the afternoon. I'll try to make it short and somewhat entertaining to keep us all awake. Quickly about me, my name is Theis. Many years ago, I was one of the co-founders of Vivino, which I hope most of this audience would know about. I have since moved on from Vivino, and I have very recently, last year, founded a new business called Dry Boots. The reason why I want to give a short plug for Dry Boots is that the data I'm going to share today is from that platform. Dry Boots is in a very short format. You can think of it as Vivino for non-alc. We go across all categories for what consumers would consider adult non-alcoholic beverages. So there's beer, there's wine, there's spirits, and then there is just a whole host of very interesting products, which are something and not quite a category that we are used to. And Proxies are part of that. We are still a small startup, and one of the first goals is to create a complete database of all non-alcoholic products in the world, which is a big task, and we are getting there. We are nowhere near being finished, but right now we have more than 5,000 different products in the database from 2,000 different brands across the world, and we have 200 online retailers that we've mapped out in terms of what they sell and so on. And then, mostly interesting for today, one of the big values that we are building in Vivino is that we are analyzing consumer sentiment around all these products. We're doing it in a structured, scalable way. And I will go more into depth on how that is, because that is the data that we are presenting today. So, AI, we can't go through the day without talking about it, and also here, because Dry Boots is a technology company. But I don't want you to think about this data as being AI generated. That is not what is going on. What we're doing is two different things. One, we're using AI to research. So we have built custom AI agents to go out and research every single consumer product that we have in the database. And then in the second round, we're using AI to distill this information into something that is structured and something that can be compared to each other. So, so that is what we have. It all boils down to a score from 0 to 100. And then three main data points. One is one we call the vibe, which is basically what is the general consensus around this product. And then we look specifically at the pros and the cons, at the advocates for this product, what are they saying, and what are the detractors saying about the product. And today we zoom in, like I said, Dry Boots has all categories of non-alcoholic beverages, which means it includes beer and spirits and so on. But in today's presentation, I'm zooming in on 8 specific categories that we have. And the reason we've picked those out is that they are either wine or something that consumers are considering as a nice alternative to wine. And Proxies is a very big part of that. So you will see we have red, white, rosé, sparkling within the de-alcoholized version of wine. And then we have what we call wine alternatives, and we have Proxies. Now, these are terms that are still developing, and I don't think anyone has a proper definition of what these are. What we go by is basically what the brand would like to be perceived as. Basically, if we ask the brand, is this a wine? Should this be put on the same shelf as wine? And if they say yes, it's a wine alternative. And if they say no, we generally call it a proxy. Wine alts are mostly not based purely on grapes. They will sometimes have a grape base, but have other things mixed in. Whereas proxies often start in a completely different place than grapes. And for both of them, it goes that there was no alcohol involved in the production process. There was no alcohol removed from the process. Then we have kombuchas and sparkling teas. And kombuchas, of course, these are well-known categories, and fermentation is part of that. So obviously there is some alcohol level, but they typically keep it below that line where you can still categorize it as a non-alcoholic product. Now, I will skip straight to the overall conclusion when we talk about these 8 categories. So just as a reminder, the scale goes from 0 to 100, and this is the general consumer sentiment around those 8 categories. Now, what you can see are a couple of pretty clear conclusions. One is that the de-alcoholized red wine is clearly the category that is struggling in terms of consumer sentiment. And you can also quite clearly see that of the 4 categories that you would consider as alternatives to the de-alcoholized wine within non-alc, they are the ones winning out, especially the kombuchas and sparkling teas, and Proxies are also up there. A notable exception or something to point out is the sparkling, and I'll come back to that. But it seems that bubbles is a bit of a cheat code when it comes to getting consumers to like your non-alcoholic product. Now, quickly on the red wine, clearly this is the one that is struggling. I don't think it comes as a surprise to many people. A de-alcoholized red wine has a number of structural problems. It's not a matter of making it slightly better. There are some fundamental issues with the de-alcoholized red wine. Some are solving it much better than others, and I think technology has come a long way. We're getting better, but clearly when we go to the consumers and ask, what do you think about these products, we are definitely not there yet. And you might even argue that we are at a point where you risk losing the market by, for many years, putting products out there that do not meet the consumer expectation. It's about the mouthfeel. It's about the thin feeling that you get, and it just hasn't been solved properly yet. There are a few premium reds that can score highly out there, but the vast majority don't. And quickly about the other de-alcoholized wine categories. Again, sparkling wine is the one that does best. Like I said, bubbles really solve problems. It adds body, which counters that thin feeling that some people get. And then also occasion, right? We saw it in the spritz presentation before. Occasion is so important, and sparkling just had that naturally lends to that. Rosé wine has a bit of the same advantage, that the expectation out of the gate from the consumer is that it is a lighter experience. So the lack of mouthfeel gets less punished simply because the expectation is different from that category. Yes. Now, for the winners, let's say, the Proxies, the kombucha, and the sparkling tea. Again, what is a Proxy? Well, generally it is not based on grapes. It can be, but generally it comes from all kinds of other things. And the starting point from the brand is rarely to necessarily make a wine alternative. They are not trying to recreate the taste of a wine in any way. They are trying to make a different product that tastes great. And the big advantage that they have is that this sets a completely different expectation in the consumer. This is not about, oh, here's a wine, but we've taken out the alcohol. See if you can taste the difference. That's not the challenge that they are trying to solve. They are trying to put something in front of you that you've never tried before. And if you're a bit adventurous, you will generally go into that with a more positive mindset. And that's what we see in the consumer sentiment. The other thing is that they really play well into food pairing. And this is something that works well in restaurants as well. And we see that in the consumer sentiment. People, when they talk about Proxies, they naturally talk about food. And that, again, is back to a lot of the brands take really good care of thinking about this when they package and when they present, when they distribute this. Many of them think restaurants first. And they really make sure that the sommeliers have something interesting to talk about. And that is another thing with Proxies that we see in the restaurants. You will have a lot of sommeliers or just waiters who are much more comfortable in bringing a proxy to a table rather than the de-alcoholized wine. Simply because here is something, there is a unique storytelling around this product. You bring your guests something that they didn't know about, and it is, again, just back to a much more positive experience. Now, the big devil in the detail, of course, is price and availability. These are the complaints that people have around proxies. They are not easy to get, and when you get them, they can be quite pricey. Now, you can definitely see that as a positive, that this is actually a product that you can charge for, and people are buying it. But the world is also littered with brands that are trying to make proxies and have not been able to make a sustainable business out of it. So it is a tricky area, but I also just want to emphasize it maybe as an opportunity here. If we are actually able to get to a place where price and availability can be solved for these products, I think there's a real market opportunity there. Kombucha is actually the highest scoring category. This is a well-known category, so it doesn't have the problem of having to be explained from Adam and Eve to a consumer. A lot of people will know them by now. It has that natural advantage that there is fermentation, which just gives a bit of complexity out of the gate. And then it has the wellness halo. A lot of times you can talk about gut health, and you can talk about what this bacteria is doing for you, and that creates a positive narrative around these products. And then you have the sparkling tea, finally. Again, this is back to occasion. Sparkling tea really lends itself well to a festive occasion. It can be seen really, truly as an alternative to putting a sparkling wine on the table. And yeah, packaging and presentation really matters when it comes to consumer sentiment, and that works really well for the sparkling. All right, so summing up a bit, we have the mouthfeel problem, and it's not solved, especially within red wine, when it comes to non-alcoholic or de-alcoholized reds, especially. But bubbles can be used as a cheat code. It really solves a lot of problems, and you can see that. You could see that in the previous presentation as well around spritzes. We're really down to a question of price versus flavor. Sorry. The wines are criticized for their taste. The alternatives, the proxies, are criticized for their price. Sorry. And then back to authenticity and expectations. It's about what consumers are expecting. And this is where proxies can really win, and kombuchas and sparkling tea, because you're not trying sorry, to put together a product that is something, but we took away something, and now it's this. It's not the de-alcoholized. It's something where a creative person from day one has sat down and said, I want to create a beverage, and I want it to taste like this. And then they've experimented and they've arrived at something. And that is a much more naturally authentic narrative that you can put to the consumer. All right, this is the summary of the 8 categories towards each other. Again, yeah, like I said, price availability is really what is keeping the proxies, kombuchas and sparkling tea out of the mass market at the moment. And I think there's a real opportunity there. Summing it up, there's expectations. You can tell a much more compelling and deep felt narrative when it comes to the proxies. I would say that looking at the consumer sentiment, the challenge for the non-alcoholic wine, especially the red, is not kind of a structural. It's not a marketing problem. It's much more fundamental than that. And then I wouldn't be looking to my marketing department to help me sell more non-alcoholic red wine. I would look at my product innovation. I would look at technology that really needs to be solved. Authenticity, and then again, I come back to it, bubbles is really a good thing when it comes to non-alcoholic and getting the consumer on your side. That is it. Thank you very much. And these are my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you want. We have way more data than this. Again, across all categories within non-alc, focused on what the consumers are saying, not so much what the marketing departments are saying.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is worth a round of applause. So, are there any questions from this really curious audience? No? You are tired? Long day? Okay, so thank you
so
very
much.
much. Still no questions? No. So I come to my third speaker. He's over there. Yes, great. So in our third session, we will talk about spirits. So again, we are looking at categories that are growing, that are performing at least better than other beverages. And we would like to know, if we talk about spirits, which categories, which markets are interesting? What role does innovation play? What about premiumization? And what about how to gain market shares? So, our next speaker is Ed Mundy. Since June 2016, he is Managing Director of Jefferies International, a bank. So yes, you get real good data here. And he worked for, before that he worked for Nomura and for a beer company, SAB Millers. He began his career at PricewaterhouseCoopers, so he's really someone into financial things. And that's why he brings us the financial perspective on the spirits market. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Anya. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Anya. So my name's Edward Mundy. I'm a beverages analyst at Jefferies, which is a US based investment bank. I'm actually based in London. And look, I cover beers, spirits, soft drinks, and loosely wine, for a living. So I've got a fantastic job, which I'm very, very fortunate to do. And today, we're essentially going to talk about this topic as to why, spirits are performing, better than wine, which is a difficult topic for me because I love wine, right? I'm a advanced holder of the Wines and Spirits Educational Trust. I have a dog called Pinot Noir, not Pinot Grigio. And look, wine is my passion, but I think we need to take an objective look as to why wine has been losing out to spirits, and more importantly, what can wine do to try and close that gap. So without further ado, this is what we're going to talk about today. So over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to run you through share of throat dynamics. Is a term we use a lot in the financial industry, in terms of what is growing share of alcohol, as opposed to whether alcohol is growing itself. And we can talk about that. That's very interesting. We're going to talk about what is spirits doing well and why spirits we think will continue to do quite well over the medium term. We're going to focus on the bright spots within wine. It's not all doom and gloom. There are some pretty good bright spots. And then we're going to talk about some of the learnings from spirits and how they can be applied, towards wine. So that's what we're going to talk about. As Anya said, I do come from more of a financial background, so there won't be as many videos, there won't be as many pictures, but there'll be lots of numbers, which is just what you want at 4 o'clock on a Monday afternoon. But I'll try and keep it entertaining for you. Right, so this first chart is very, very important. This shows you global alcohol between 2010, 2024, and then all the way out to 2029, split between beer in blue, spirits in grey, wine in gold, and then others, which is largely ready-to-drinks, as well as cider, within light blue. This is on a revenue basis, not an ABV basis. So the first point that you will see from this chart is that wine has been losing share from nearly 22% to 19% share of global revenues, which is not a great trajectory, and is expected to continue to lose some share over the next 5 years or so. Who's been taking share? Well, it's not beer. You can see that beer has been pretty flat over this 10-year period, lost quite a lot of share during COVID, and then has bounced back quite well. Beer clearly over-indexes towards the on-trade, and therefore they really lost out during the pandemic period. Spirits has taken some pretty decent share, growing about 150 basis points, 140 basis points of share. And then other, which is largely ready-to-drinks, has also gone from 2.2 to 3.7. So of that 300 basis points share loss of wine, roughly half has gone to spirits, and roughly half has gone to ready-to-drinks. And look, ready-to-drinks are complicated because spirits are playing with it, and also beer is playing within it. But that's the overall trajectory as to what's happened from an overall share of throat standpoint. Now, this chart is very complicated, and it's complicated for a reason. What it shows you is the top 10 markets by alcohol globally, and then aggregated to the top 20, and then it shows you global as well. And it's a lot to take in, but it's complicated for a reason, because there's no clear pattern when you look at share of throat trends by market. So if we look at the US, first of all, the biggest market for alcohol in the world, beer has had a horror story in the US. Beer has lost nearly 1,500 basis points of share over the last 15 years. And that goes back all the way to 2020. So it's been over 2,000 basis points share of throat loss from the beer industry. But who's gobbled it up? In gray, it's spirits. And then you've got ready-to-drinks as well. So wine hasn't played an important role in taking that share of throat away from beer. Wine's been broadly stable within the US. What about the second biggest market in the world, China? Well, look, China, beer's had a really good run. Beer's been through a super cycle of 30, 40 years where people drank no beer, up to 30 liters or so of beer, starting to peter out a little bit. But look, beer's done almost the mirror image of what's happened in the US. What about Brazil? Again, beer's done incredibly well in these emerging markets, right? And the narrative in the emerging markets generally is that people drink the local indigenous subsistence alcohol, $1 a bottle. They then trade up as they earn a bit of money into beer. The question for wine is what happens beyond that as the middle classes grow. And that's what I think is a very, very important point for wine. If we look at the UK, beer is lost, a little bit like the US. And here spirits has done quite well. France, wine's given up some share, and beer's taken share. So I think the point from this chart is there's no homogeneous picture. You've got to look at it on a country-by-country basis in terms of what is winning, what is driving share of throat, because ultimately it's very, very different on a market-by-market basis. And I really like this chart. This chart shows an example, in this case, Sweden, of what's happened over a 60-year period as opposed to a 15-year period. And those among you that are eagle-eyed will notice that it's all over the place, right? It has been a ebb and flow for every single different type of alcohol. So if we take spirits, which is in gray here, in 1960, spirits was the industry. It was the market. They had over 50% share of throat. And they were battling it out with beer in the 60s and 70s. And then it sort of flattened off a little bit in the 70s and 80s period. And then here you can just see this huge generational shift come through where beer took pretty much one for one from spirits as new consumers came in. This old sort of heavy drinking vodka belt of spirits here came into sharp decline. And younger consumers not doing what their parents did. They wanted to drink beer, they wanted to focus on moderation, and spirits just went down like that. Fortunately for Sweden, they managed to export their vodka internationally, in particular with Absolut, so it's not all doom and gloom for the vodka industry within Sweden. But look, from a drinking standpoint, I mean, these changes are huge. And then beer had this big boom here. But look at wine. Wine was nowhere in the 1960s. And then gradually it started to creep up here and just creep up here underneath the radar. No one really noticed it. And then suddenly it just put the turbos on and just went off like that. So that when you look at this chart, spirits is where wine was in 1960, and wine is where spirits was in 1960. So a huge mismatch of what's happened here. And so the question really is, what happened here with wine to really catapult it, right? And I think it's a number of factors. we saw clearly much better education. I think the industry did a tremendous job educating consumers about wine. You saw sort of European culture. You know, people went on holiday to Europe, they brought back wine, very similar to what we have with Aperol Spritz today. People go to Italy, they come back, they bring it back home with them. So, you know, that type of culture piece, and then wine was consumed, you know, with food as well. So I think this is a really fascinating chart in terms of how share of throat trends can shift depending on culture, depending on what's really driving that, and therefore a fatalistic approach of, well, something's never going to grow, I think is factually incorrect. So if we look at the global picture once again and look at growth over the last 14, 15 years or so, and this is compound average growth, sort of beer, wine, spirits, all quite close together in terms of their growth. We then come off here. There was a big sort of clamp down in China around about here, so the industry came off the boil a little bit. Had a pretty good run with emerging markets, into the pandemic period. We clearly dropped off during the pandemic, and then a V-shaped recovery coming through that, with some overconsumption as well during the pandemic, some over-premiumization. So this super cycle was really manifested here. Beer took a little bit longer to come out, but this now come through very, very strongly. But wine didn't come through anywhere near as strongly in this post-pandemic period as well. So look, taking a step back, I showed you before the share of throat trends. These are the actual growth trends. It's pretty clear that wine has been growing at roughly half the pace of both beer and also spirits from a revenue growth standpoint, from a sales standpoint. So we looked at the different markets and share of throat trends across the different markets. Why is it that spirits is at the top of the tree, is the question. So I think there are really three key reasons why spirits has done so well. The first point is, and for those who are not financial analysts, I'll try and make this obvious. If you look at most consumer goods companies, the brands that can sell things for the highest price, such as cosmetics, makeup, spirits, tend to have the best gross margins. So they tend to have the smallest COGS, the highest gross margins. So you're looking at your cost after production costs for spirits companies in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, similar to cosmetics with a company like L'Oreal, for instance. And what that means is that further down the income statement within the P&L, you've got much more scope, much more oxygen for marketing investment. So these spirits companies are investing 15 to 20% of their sales behind brand building. And then on top of that, you've got all the trade spend as well. So the first point is that because of the very nature of these companies being incredibly profitable, their marketing spend is on a different level. So Diageo, biggest spirits company in the world, is spending about $4,000 a year on marketing, on their brands. These are large-scale brands with big marketing teams. You've got another $3 billion of trade spend as well. So they're throwing $7 billion at the industry, which is an enormous number, frankly, across beverage alcohol. The second point is premiumization. These companies have done a great job in terms of their price laddering. Clearly, part of that comes back to the marketing spend. Part of it comes back from the nature of the product that lends itself quite well, towards trading up. So I think this less but better trend is something they've really exploited incredibly well. Third of all, innovation. They've done a good job on innovation when it comes to packaging, refreshing their packaging, pushing ready to drink, ready to serve. Yes, they can always do better, but they've tended to innovate incredibly well on the packaging side of things, which is not something you see across all of consumer goods and across all of alcohol. And then finally, flavors. Now, flavors can be a bit of a two-edged sword. If you do too many flavors, you can erode your brand equity, but their ability to drive flavors very, very quickly at a quick turn and bring new consumers in, especially younger legal drinking age consumers, into the market has been very, very impressive as well. So a lot of this does come from the starting point, which is this is a very, very profitable industry with very deep pockets, which allows for deep levels of reinvestment. The second point I would point to is really cocktail culture. We saw from the Swedish example just now the importance of culture, bringing new generations in, to categories. And look, spirits, they're trendy, right? They're higher margin for the trade, so they push them as well. They bring in younger consumers, and there is this aspirational quality as well to spirits, which consumers like. And then finally, we think that the industry is very well aligned with modern consumption. People are not drinking every day. It's more of an occasional basis. It's very easy to mix these products. They're very, very versatile. There's a huge amount of experiential marketing that can take place as well. And they're just less reliant on that moment of consumption, opening a bottle of wine, with dinner. And they are generally just a little bit more versatile, which lends itself well, I think, to the next generation and modern consumption, coming through. But look, where is wine growing? And what we've shown on this chart is historical growth on the left-hand side, and then future growth on the right-hand side. And we've put, look, green is the emerging markets and blue is the developed markets. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to see where the growth is going to come from here. It's really going to come through, from those emerging markets. I think, look, there will be growth in some mature markets. I showed you the Swedish example, for instance. But look, ultimately, the opportunity set is to come into these big emerging markets where you've got middle-class growth, you've got urbanization, you've got young growing populations. There's going to be 600 million new middle-class consumers by 2032 coming into the market looking for something to drink. And they are not going to drink what their parents drank. They're not going to drink the indigenous alcohol. They're going to move into beer, they're going to move into premium spirits, and they're going to move into wine. So a huge opportunity in the emerging markets, but wine needs to be there and wine needs to show up and participate in that battle of share of throat. So this is my last slide. So what can wine learn from spirits? So as I said at the start, like, I'm much more of a wine person. I know I spend most of my time talking about spirits and beer and soft drinks from a job standpoint, but look, the storytelling behind wine is on a different level, in my opinion. I remember one of the first wines that, when I was a early 20s person, just getting into wine, went along to a wine tasting, and the guy told this story about this block of the vineyard that was named after his Labrador. And we all just got captivated by that. And I'm not sure that storytelling necessarily comes through when we're talking about the region, we're talking about the vineyard, we're talking about the producer, which are very, very important if you're a wine connoisseur. But if you don't know much about wine, you need to be brought in into the wines through the storytelling. And I frankly believe that the storytelling in wine is on a different level compared to soft drinks, beer, or even spirits. Consumer engagement, look, wine is quite intimidating for people that don't understand the grapes, the aspect, the producer, how it's made, et cetera, et cetera. So, look, there's a big opportunity, I think, to simplify the navigation of wine. And it's even more straightforward than that. It's the pronunciation, right? I mean, I don't know if any of you know the story about the chicken wine within the UK. No? Okay, so Perrin had this brilliant wine. They have a white, they have a red, and they have a rosé. And I don't speak very good French. It's called La Vieille Ferme, so the old farm. And as a Brit, no one could pronounce that. But it's got a chicken on the front. And therefore, we saw this wine being relaunched as the chicken wine because people can't pronounce it. And look, it just points to sort of serve and underline that, look, the barriers to entry need to be lower to allow new consumers, young legal drinking age consumers, to come in and understand this category. New occasions, look, I think, wine is obviously first and foremost there with food, as we've heard from the previous speakers. Look, big opportunity to mix that up a little bit. Let's do some more spirits. Let's do maybe some lower ABV. Let's do some cold red wines. Lots more opportunity to diversify beyond just opening a bottle of wine, with dinner. Innovation on the format side of things. If I told you that in the US market at the moment, the only growth is in 375 ml spirits. 750 and above is not growing because of affordability considerations. I think the same is true here, and the opportunity to embrace single-serve cans, half bottles, and really diversify beyond the 750 ml, I think, is a big opportunity for wine. The moderation messages. Look, wine's been around for thousands of years. It's a natural product. It's a low ABV product. Why is no one saying that? Why is spirits able to sort of muscle in there with the 40% ABV? Low and no, you heard from the last speaker around that. Look, I think a big opportunity, especially within sparkling. But whoever can crack the code on low and no, I think is going to make a lot of money. The on-premise, again, brands are built in the on-premise, as you know. Spirits have been built there. Cocktails have been built there. Cocktails don't just come along because someone decides one day to wake up and drink a cocktail. They come through bartender advocacy, and they come through that investment. So, like, a big opportunity to do more in the on-trade. And then finally, look, fragmentation. You know, it's a very, very fragmented industry. I'm not sure that's going to be solved overnight, but look, in the fullness of time, you can see that that's starting to change. And then more money going behind brand building and really, you know, trying to boost wine. So look, that's all we have time for. Any questions? There's my details. Please don't hesitate.
So, are there any questions? I'm looking briefly in the room because yes, there's one question. Microphone, there's one question, please.
Hello, this is Nelson from Hong Kong, Wine magazine. So actually, I would like to know more about the contrast about the spirit market and also the non-alcohol or low alcohol, because that is extreme. You know, we're talking about the Gen Z, people like no alcohol, but at the same time, you can see many people like the spirits and the cocktails. And do you have any findings about this?
Yeah, it's we read a big piece of research about 6 months ago on, you know, what's happened to alcohol, what's the future of alcohol, and, you know, clearly there's 100 different reasons. We actually found 27 different reasons as to why, you know, the industry is under pressure. What's interesting is that, you know, when you look at Gen Z, yes, every generation is obviously different, but when you look at the things that are growing from a Gen Z standpoint, it's a lot of the ready-to-drinks, and a lot of those ready-to-drinks are actually quite high ABV. So if you take the US market today, right here today, if you look at the data on a monthly basis, the single biggest driver of growth in the US is a brand that's 12% ABV in a can. Right, so the brands that are doing incredibly well are not the 4 or 5% ABV RTDs, they're the 11, the 12s, the 13s. So we've got brands like Cutwater, we've got brands like Buzzballs, you've got brands like Beatbox, all very high ABV. And those are not aimed at you and me. They're aimed at younger consumers who want to get the functional benefit of alcohol, you know, on quickly. So my personal view is, yes, you know, people will participate more in low alcohol, but the low alcohol agenda is more for the older consumer that's, you know, looking to moderate, you know, their consumption, as opposed to necessarily the younger consumer.
Okay, so thank you very much. This was really great information. And yes, a big round of applause. Before I announce Jamie Good, who will talk about technology, labor, and the economics of survival in the vineyard, I ask my colleague Alexandra Fran to come to me on the stage. Alexandra Fran, wine journalist and co-founder of 8 Wine and Things. We curated this conference together and we will moderate this panel together.
Yes.
And my name is Anja Zimmer, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I was just about to introduce you, but thank you. Now I can cross out at least one half sentence. Yes. Thank you again. I'm Alexandra Van. I'm wine journalist, and Anja and I have founded not only the agency but this conference together. And yes, I'm welcoming you to the final of this second day at Agora. And as I imagine, everybody is like now full of data, information, inspiration. And this is why we had the idea to like smooth out after the last keynote and get you in the mood for a nice and smooth and loungy evening. And we came up with the idea to invite knowledgeable, inspiring wine personality from all over the world. And for today, we decided to talk about the viticulture of the future. And we invited one of the most knowledgeable wine personalities in the world to talk about this specific topic. And his name is Jamie Good. He knows best when it comes to the vineyard of the future, the vineyard of today, but of course the vineyard of the future. Jamie is a wine writer, a wine columnist with the UK national newspaper, The Sunday Express. He is author of several books, manages his own blog, wineanorak.com. Check this up. And he produces a docu-series, The Science of Wine. But moreover, he also has a PhD in plant biology, which I think most wine journalists cannot say of themselves. At least I do not have any PhD. And this makes him even more knowledgeable about what is really happening in the vineyard.
So when we met first, Jamie and I, it was, I think, in Portugal, and he quite impressed me with the insistence he puts on wine science. He makes a strong case for a more evidence-based approach by examining topics ranging from terroir to sustainability, to change, to yeast. So there are a lot of things you can discuss with him. Sustainability is for him not a buzzword, but something which has to be done. So he's a perfect person for this panel. Please come to the stage and let us participate in your knowledge.
Again, the big round applause, please. Stage is yours.
Thanks. So that was a fantastic introduction. It's probably longer than my talk will be, but that's brilliant. So today what I want to talk about is rethinking the way that we do viticulture with a view to the future. And an important aspect of this is financial sustainability, because obviously the wine sector at the moment is under significant financial pressure, and a lot of people are farming grapes at a cost that is not sustainable. So what are the challenges? We've got 7.1 million hectares of vines, and some of this vineyard area, I believe, is a legacy of the past, because in the past, you know, we don't have to go back too far when there was an absolute need for lots and lots of wine. You know, volume was the key driver. And when the phylloxera crisis impacted viticulture globally, you know, people were desperate because they needed a lot of wine. So a lot of the structure of wine industries, for instance, the Languedoc in the south of France, you know, that's a vineyard area that was geared up for producing just volume. And so what we've got is we've got this shift really from the traditional wine-producing countries where people were drinking a lot. And that's kind of been going down for 50 years, you know. And so we've got this factor, we've got this legacy vineyard area that was in place to supply volume, where now we don't so much need so much of that volume. Another problem we've got is the depopulation of vineyard regions. For instance, go to the Douro Valley in Portugal, spectacular vineyards. This is mountain viticulture on a grand scale. There are 43,500 hectares of vines in the Douro, many of which are on steep slopes. But if you go there, there's not so many people there. People have been leaving the vineyard areas, moving to cities. So you've got old people farming these vineyards. And so this is a big issue in many areas where people have moved away from agriculture and agricultural settings towards cities. If you look at the statistics in the US, for instance, when tractors came along, and now tractors really only came along in the 30s and 40s. And when tractors came along, you've got this massive decrease in the horse population because horses were used in agriculture, but also because you've got the efficiency of mechanization of agriculture, you've got this amazing shift from, I think it was something like 30% of people involved in farming to like 4% now. So you've got this massive depopulation of agricultural regions and wine regions generally. So that's a big problem. The other challenge we've got is climate chaos. I don't need to say anything about this. It's not just a warming trend, but also it's more unpredictable weather trends. And that's a big issue. And we're looking at a warmer, drier future. And for many wine regions, such as the Mediterranean-style wine regions, warmer and drier spells disaster. And then we've got this issue with the lack of financial sustainability. And one of the factors is that people don't do their sums properly. Now, if you took $1 million, I used dollars because that was the calculation of compound interest that I was using. You take $1 million. In 10 years, if you're investing this, you're investing this maybe in some fairly safe global ETFs or something. You can probably guarantee you're going to get 7% over a long period. Now, over 10 years, 7% compounded means you've gone from 1 million to 1.96, so 1,967,151.36. So that's just with 7% compound interest each year. This original million, say for instance you had a vineyard that cost you $1 million. Now, after 10 years, if you'd invested that money in a modest fund, you would have this much. But people don't calculate that. And then, of course, you've got to look at inflation as well. So with inflation, what you're looking at, inflation since then, and this is in pounds, but imagine this is in dollars, it's gone up from 1 million to 1.354 million. So the gap there, which most people don't account for, is quite a large chunk of money. It's like 600,000. And people don't do their sums. They're sitting on vineyard land that's worth a lot of money, but they don't calculate the lost opportunity cost of having that money. So if you're going to be truly financially sustainable, you have to do these sums. You have to put in the lost opportunity cost of that capital sum that you've got because it's been paid off 5 generations ago. That's still something that could earn you money if you traded it. So that's a challenge. So one other big challenge, I think, when you get to a situation with vineyards is it takes about 5 years to get a vineyard from planting into a decent scale of production. You'll probably get a crop after 3 years, but let's say 5 years to plant to get a vineyard in production. So what happens is you get this situation, we've had this in the UK, you've got a boom. So English sparkling wine is booming, so people are planting vineyards, boom, 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 boom. By the time there's a downturn and a softening in demand, people have planted now, in 5 years' time, they'll be getting a lot more grapes. So what you don't do is you don't have these supply and demand curves in sync. They're displaced somewhat. So by the time the demand's gone down, those more vineyards are still being planted. Because then people start pulling vineyards out. And then there's a demand again. And so what you get is these curves are out of sync. And this is a big challenge. So this is why sometimes some sort of state intervention, governments often do this in countries like France, is justified because it's providing a buffer. As long as the cycle is going to pick up again, sometimes putting in some state intervention can provide this valuable buffer so that these curves aren't running wildly out of sync with each other. So this is an issue. Now let's think about what sort of things we could see in vineyards in the future that would make them more affordable to farm. One of them is robotics, and this is something that is already present in vineyards. This was a vineyard in the Mackinac. The guy's been using this for a year or two now. It's the Vitibot Bacchus, and you'll see at the back there. You can go down here, and this is a device for clearing the undervine growth. And this is all robotic. It's electrically powered. There's a lot of technology being developed now. This is something I saw in Italy at a demonstration day. There's a lot of people working hard on robotics so that they can get vineyards more mechanized, because labor is one of the huge costs in viticulture. And every time you're going down a row, especially if you've got close planting, because you've got close planting, you know, if you think about a 1 hectare vineyard, 10,000 vines a hectare, to go down the rows all the way up, you're doing 10 kilometers. So it's a lot of distance. Robotics, I think, is something that's being developed, and that shows a lot of promise. Then we've got things like this. This is a Monarch electric tractor. Sadly, Monarch have just gone bust, but this was an electric tractor that can be mechanized, that can be operated robotically. But the company was very promising, but they've gone bust now. And then we've got things like this. This is a demonstration of the Australian Wine Technical Conference this year. This is UVC, and it's UVC is basically is a way to treat powdery mildew. And there's a lot of companies working on this now. The problem is with this technology is it has to be done at night in the dark, and you have to have 4 hours of darkness after the treatment for it to be effective in killing all the powdery mildew. If you think about when you have the most powdery mildew pressure, it's when the nights are the shortest. So the challenge is sometimes you only have 2 or 3 hours of operation each night to cover your vineyard. But this is a technology that's quite promising. This is a vineyard in Germany. This is another way of saving costs, is if you can do minimal pruning or zero pruning, or you can mechanize pruning. And this is something that people have been trying quite a bit. They tried it in Australia in the 80s, in Coonawarra especially, and it didn't work out so well. But this particular vineyard is actually this is Kloster Erbebach. They've got a few blocks like this, and it seems to work for them. It's not their top quality wine, but this is a good quality vineyard they've got it in. And what they say, it allows them to stagger the harvest a bit, because the grapes you get from this sort of, you get small clusters all over the canopy, and they develop and ripen a bit later. So that allows you to stagger your harvest a bit. So that's useful. And then you've got technology that's aimed to reduce the use of pesticides. This is in Japan. You'll find in Japan most of the growing season, most of the rainfall comes during the growing season. And this is in Nagano, and they've got various technologies in Japan from keeping the rain off the grape clusters. And this has been tried elsewhere as well. This is a technology called VitiTunnel. And this has been trialed, I know at least Lafite have trialed this. And what happens is it's automatic, and whenever it rains, which is where you're going to get the downy mildew risk, this shield comes out, and it protects the vines. And I think Lafite, the trials they did, they used it 6 times in one growing season where it did this. And it worked. It was the only way they could avoid using copper for treating downy mildew, was to use this technology. The challenge with it is it's really expensive, and the appellation laws don't allow it. And now one other thing, the Vitivoltaic vineyard in the Rheingau near Rüdesheim, Geisenheim University have established this Vitivoltaic vineyard, and these are solar panels. They tilt to harvest the sun. It has the advantage that it cools things down a bit, because you're providing a little bit of shade, and it creates power that you can power all your electric vehicles and everything that you use in the vineyard. It looks very weird, but it's worked quite well for them. So the big question there is this a sustainable thing? Is this something you can do? Is the cost sustainable? I don't like the idea of having these metal constructions all over a vineyard, but people are thinking about what can we do? First of all, to offset the risk of disease. Secondly, to create green energy. And thirdly, to cool the vineyard down a bit. And then we've got things like drone spraying. The advantage of drone spraying is you can go in early when otherwise you might compact your soils by going in to spray your fungicides when you need to do it at the early stages. So a lot of people have started trying the drone spraying when you want to get into a vineyard, when it's a difficult time to get in the vineyard, when it might cause problems for you. And of course, then we've got to think about Vitis vinifera. Most of the varieties that are grown around the world are varieties of Vitis vinifera. And Vitis vinifera lacks our genes, these true resistance genes, to downy and powdery mildew. So as a result, we need to spray an awful lot. And actually, one of the most sustainable things you can do, and one of the ways of reducing the costs of running vineyards that's most effective, is to breed resistant varieties. And this is the way it's been done. Breeding resistant varieties, it's projects that have been going on and have really expanded quite a lot in recent years. So you're taking the resistance genes from powdery and downy mildew from American and Asian Vitis species. So they actually have these true R genes, and by crossing, you cross with vinifera, then you check that those genes are still there, and you can do that with molecular techniques now, which is really good. And then you can pyramid them, so you get more than one downy mildew resistance gene and more than one powdery resistance gene, so that the fungus can't overcome those defenses so easily. And then you back cross with vinifera to get varieties. And this is Valentin Blattner, Volker Freitag, he's a nursery guy. Blattner's been responsible for many of the good resistant varieties that are being grown today. And this is in September. These are just trial varieties that they've made in their trial vineyard. That's not been sprayed once. This is in September 23. And if you looked at the neighboring vineyards, they've sprayed them 15 times and they're still ravaged by downy mildew. And so they're doing this breeding process where they're coming up with these new varieties, trialing them. And some of them look really promising, and then they have to do micro-vinifications. And after a long time, you end up with new varieties. And so we get these peewees, they're often known by, and there's lots of them being grown in vineyards all around the world at the moment, and there's a big demand for them. And they're making some really nice vines. And this is a really good example from Staffelterhof in Germany, in the Moselle. They've got a 2-hectare block, Krove Paradis, where they're growing these resistant varieties, but they're also doing, and these are some of the regenerative viticulture techniques that I think are really interesting: cover cropping, mulching, using biochar, incorporating animals, and these are ways you can incorporate animals. This is at Greystone in New Zealand. They've raised the canopies so they can run sheep all the year round. Regenerative hydrology, this is a big one. I'm rushing through this, but this is all covered in the book I wrote, Regenerative Viticulture. It's really interesting. So regenerative hydrology is the way of you get your land and you basically try and keep the water on it. And it was developed in Australia in the 1950s, called the Keyline Plan, and you watch the normal flow of water on your land. So when you get a lot of water at one time, that causes erosion. But what you do is you get your land so that you keep the water on it as much as possible. In agroforestry, this is what I was talking about. This is Krove Paradis. This is Staffelterhof's vineyard. So they've got agroforestry plus resistant varieties. It's a super cool project. Last slide. The moral imperative to true sustainability is that we need to reduce farming costs. But at the same time, we need more resilient vineyards. And I think this is where we can go with these sort of vineyards of the future, thinking about ways of farming that make vineyards more resilient. And I think, to be honest, true sustainability is not an option. We can't sort of like pass the bill on to the next generation. We have to actually start making vineyards really sustainable now. And that includes financial sustainability. And at the moment, we have this problem that a lot of wines on the market, certainly at the bottom end of the market, are too cheap in the sense that they're not truly sustainable. The farming cannot be sustainable to produce wines that are that cheap. And so that's all I'm going to say. It's a little rapid run through of some of the ideas, how we might make vineyards truly sustainable vineyards of the future. And those are some of the books that I've written. This is the one that I was pimping earlier on, Regenerative Viticulture, 2nd edition. This has got all those ideas expanded in a lot more detail.
Can I do it? Yes. Give me. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jamie. We are now trying to set up the scene, because you're not finished yet, though. Yeah. There's some questions we need to ask. Give us the chance to ask those questions first, but of course you get the chance to ask your questions as well. Thank you so much, Jamie. You talk a lot about sustainability, and it is a trigger word in the industry nowadays. Everybody is talking about it, but we always question who is living it. When we talk about sustainability, we do need to keep 3 factors in balance. That's environmentally, it's the economical basis you're working on, because if you run out of business, there's no sustainable business anymore. And it's social factors. That means personal costs, staff. And as we all know, labor costs in the vineyard, in a winery, is probably the highest of all. For example, in Germany, the minimum wage will raise to at least almost 15 euros an hour in the future. How can wineries, wine producers keep up with these? How can they keep these 3 pillars in balance yeah, if we look at those external costs?
Well, I think they need to. First of all, is understanding how you sell your wine, and having some level of control over your route to market is really important. So, I think the best way of segmenting the wine world is by market channel. So it's how because wine is, we talk about wine globally, and I think it's meaningless. We absolutely need to segment. And segmenting by consumer group is silly, I think, because consumers behave differently on different days. So, and segmenting by birth year cohort is just like astrology. It's senseless. It's really, if people talk about Gen Z as if it's a real thing, and where you've got this massive confounder, which is lifestyle, the stage of life you're at. And if you look carefully, you'll see that someone who's Gen Z, as they get older, they change, So I think the most sensible way of segmenting the wine market is by market channel, how the wines go to market. So if you understand that, then you make yourself relevant and profitable within your segment. And I think the problem is we have too many wineries now that aren't ever going to be sustainably profitable. So then the thing they cut is they cut costs in the vineyard. So the easy way of cutting costs in the vineyard is to use herbicides and to use pesticides. And you get good yields when you use herbicides and pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. It's often the biggest yields that you get, but then you're in this vicious circle of getting bigger yields, lower wine quality, selling cheaper, and there'll always be somebody who's got wine they need to sell more cheaply than you, especially in a market where there's more supply than there is demand. So these have conspired to keep wine artificially cheap at the bottom end, and so there's not enough money to pay for the things you need to do viticulture in a truly sustainable way. But I think this is where, if you are going to cut some costs, then the best way of doing it is by growing resistant varieties, because then you cut all that spraying, as long as you can sell them. I think this is why I'm quite excited about them, because environmentally they're so much more sustainable. Actually, what would be truly sustainable is genetically modified vines, because then you could keep Pinot Noir and Riesling and Chardonnay, and you wouldn't have to spray them. This would be true sustainability, but obviously some people have a problem with that.
Exactly, and that brings me to my next question. Thank you, thank you for triggering this. You talked a lot about the so-called PVs, new varieties, but high-end winemakers and sommeliers, high-end retailers, the connoisseurs in the wine world, all are still a bit skeptical when it comes to the quality, especially because they wonder if they can be a replacement for Vitis vinifera, who is able, as we all think, or as the fine wine world thinks, is able to express the soil, the place of birth, the place where it has been grown. And we do not know yet if a Sauvignon Gris or a Cabernet Blanc is able to do the same thing, or if it's just the genetics that makes the wine taste the way it tastes. No, what do you answer to this?
I'm very sympathetic to that viewpoint, because I understand you've got to sell wine, and there's certain, and also that so far, most people who've been working with the resistant varieties have been making high yield techno wines sold at low prices. They're tutti frutti and they're nice and they're tasty, but not many people have taken them seriously. And I would love to see some people taking resistant varieties seriously, planting them in really good vineyards, managing them well, and then making wines in a very intelligent way rather than just simple techno tank fermented wines. Because then I think we could actually see whether these are capable of greatness or not. I think the breeding programs need to carry on. And obviously a lot of breeding programs have been driven by the more value end of the market and the needs of the market at that end. And I would love to see breeding programs, first of all, that aren't just about cool climate, that we see some warm climate varieties emerge. Then also that people would actually start breeding with a view to making really high quality wine. Actually, aside from genetic modification, we do actually have gene editing, which isn't counted as GM by most countries. And gene editing has the promise to let you keep, they're not introducing genes, but what they're doing is they're going in surgically and taking out, for instance, susceptibility genes, which are the things that the fungi use to recognize the host. And actually, there's some very interesting work on this from Italy in particular, where they've actually produced varieties that have a reasonably durable resistance to downy and powdery mildew through gene editing. And so that's something to watch, I think.
I have one last question before I hand over to Anya for your questions. When it comes to sustainability, at least in the winemaking bubble, in the sommelier bubble, I do know that very well in Germany. People are always very conflicted or divided in their opinions between the organic and biodynamic producers on the one hand, who are not using any pesticides, and on the other hand, we have sustainability labels that do allow a certain usage of pesticides in the vineyard to assure that you, at least in the end of the year, you have a harvest to pay your bills, to be economically sustainable. What is your answer to this? How do you see this conflict of interests?
So I think that the problem with many sustainability schemes is that they allow too many things. They're not really truly sustainable. I think true sustainability is, can you carry on doing the same thing for 500 years in your vineyard? There's a guy in New Zealand, Jeff Thorpe at Riverside Nurseries. He came up with this at I think it was a Sauvignon conference in 2018 or 19, and he said, you know, if you're saying this something is sustainable, you've got to be able to keep doing it for 500 years or 1,000 years. And with most sustainability schemes, they don't meet that standard. So they use the term sustainability, but they're borrowing it and misappropriating it. I think there's organics and biodynamics are fantastic, but they are not always the most sustainable way of farming. Because, you know, putting copper into your vineyard is a really bad idea. And if you're farming in anywhere that has some growing season rainfall, downy mildew is your problem, and copper is the only thing in the organic arsenal that actually works against it. So we've got this, we need to rethink it a little bit. God didn't say, this is what organics is, and this is what biodynamics is, and this is the best way of farming, and it's the ultimate end of the pyramid. While I think organics and biodynamics get you a long way in terms of farming the best way, I think the best way is to farm regeneratively, which is not a toolkit. It's not like a recipe, it's a toolkit. So it's a toolkit of approaches, and you pick the ones that you think can improve the biodiversity, the functional biodiversity of your vineyard, the resilience of your vineyard. And this is why I think regenerative is very positive, because anybody can start on that journey, even a big company. And we want the big companies to take up these truly sustainable ways of farming, because otherwise it's just a rich person's club. And we don't want that.
Thank you. Anja, I'll hand it over to you for your questions.
Yes, thank you. So as we are here at the end of the day, a long day, we are sitting in very comfortable chairs. We would like to have a loungy format. I change the issue a little bit and go away from sustainability. And I would like to ask you, because you write a lot about terroir, do you think you can taste soil in wine?
I think that question is I think you can taste the impact of the soil on the flavor of the wine, but you don't taste the soil in the wine. So the terroir, I think, is a very interesting topic, and I think it's fascinating. When I get together with my geek friends, often someone will say, what soil type does this wine come from? And I'll say, I think it's granite. And why do you think that? It's very bright and linear. It's got that like fruit-forward character. Oh, what's this one? Oh, this is limestone. This limestone, I can feel with the acid line and the way it feels in the mouth. This is a limestone sort of wine. And so I think, clay, what does clay give to the wine? And I know these are very generalized, some approximations of what the soils are like in the vineyard, but I do think you can reliably, after you've tasted a lot, detect the characteristic soil type and the effect on the flavor of the wine. And it's often quite subtle, but it's there. And I think that we don't taste the soils, but we do taste the impact of the soils. And effectively, for that to be present in the wine, what's going to have to happen is that it's going to change the physiology of the vine in subtle ways, that the berries, after all, that's all that ends up in the fermentation, have got a different composition. So when they're crushed for white wine to make a must, or for reds they're crushed and you've got the skins there as well, what that is creating is then a fermentation medium for the yeasts to work on. And so the different composition of the must then shapes the way that the yeasts then grow and behave, because it's the yeasts that make most of the aroma compounds in wine. So when you go to the vineyards in Burgundy, you take the grapes and you crush them, you taste the juice, you can't really tell them apart. But once you allow the yeast to do their work, and so the yeast are creating compounds de novo, but they're also transforming flavor precursors present in the must. And then you get this wonderful complex thing, which is wine and wine aroma and wine flavor. And that's an indirect effect, very indirect, but it's a real thing. So obviously soil is affecting the way the vine grows, that then affects the way the grapes grow, that then affects the must in terms of the growth medium for the yeasts, which then do the work. and the bacteria as well, of course. So this is super fascinating.
So if you talk about terroir, do you think the wine world, if we talk with each other, not if we talk with the consumer, obviously, that we are too romantically about terroir? Should we have more science in it?
No, I think I believe in romance as well as science. I don't want us to become totally reductive. We need the magic, you know. We need the talk, the chat, the stuff around wine to make it what it is. We can't just be like, oh, this has got a pH of so. It's like, oh, I can taste this chemical. We can't do that with wine. We don't understand enough about, first of all, the viticulture. Second, we don't understand enough about wine flavor chemistry, and thirdly, about human perception to say, to put flavor down to certain compounds. It's this amazing complexity that's almost too complex for us to actually reduce down to a simple story. I think sometimes we make too much of terroir for sure. And for some wines, terroir doesn't matter. I just want a delicious drink. And this is why I quite like the natural wine movement. I love natural wine. Often you get, like a lot of natural wines were made in the same way. They have a certain flavor and character, which is more about natural wine than it is about place. But that's not always a disaster, because actually sometimes they're delicious drinks. You know, I just love them. I love these light style reds that are smashable and have this sense of deliciousness. And, you know, that's perfectly legitimate. We don't have to be able to tell where a wine comes from to enjoy it.
Okay, so my next question goes a little bit in the same direction. Do we need more science in wine, or do we need more storytelling about science?
I think what we need is a true science of wine, not because that was the problem with the old scientific viticulture that saw the vineyard just as a growth medium for the vines and just thought vines growing crop plant will focus on that. Now we've got this system where agroecology, where we think about the whole agro ecosystem, and that's real science now. That was a very simple. What was labeled as science before was too simplistic. I mean, what we've got is this beautiful agro ecosystem with so many interactions. It's like. And suddenly we've got some really interesting science. So what we need more in wine is we need better science, and we need science that's explained better. We don't want the simplistic science, but also, you know, science has to take its place amidst other legitimate ways of talking about wine. Science is like one language, and we've got lots of languages for talking about wine. And they're all legitimate. And also, let's face it, people who've been growing vines for 12,000 years now, you know, the two centers of domestication, not just Georgia, also the Levant as well. And from that, wine is spread around the world, and people have been farming wine grapes, and they do their own experiments before science was even known, before we even knew what yeast were doing. People were understanding that if you did this, this, and this, the wine would taste really cool. If you did this, it's not so cool. So the little trial and errors and all these many iterations have resulted in this beautiful complexity of wine. That's science, but even though it's not labeled science, it's like people trying things out and seeing what works best. That's science, and it's beautiful. It doesn't need to be framed in scientific language.
Yeah, absolutely. One more personal question. You're doing it for a long time now. So what keeps you curious about wine after all these years?
Because first of all, it's a big world, right? That you can keep exploring, and I traveled so much, and I go to regions, and I discover, even in regions I've been to quite a lot, I discover new things. And also what keeps me curious is when you see, like, you go to somewhere and you find some 25-year-old who's committed their life to farming a small plot of land and making wines. It's like, that's a beautiful vocational drive with wine. You know, it's something, when it's done well, when it's the most interesting sort of wine, this is kind of beautiful that people are prepared to dedicate their lives to this, not because they think it's a way of getting rich, but because they think it's an interesting thing, and then they make a product that brings people together, and a product that has cultural significance. I think that's fantastic, and that for me is very energizing, you know, and I kind of like, I admire what they do so much. I'm just somebody who kind of comes and looks what they're doing and tries to help the good guys to win, you know?
Okay, one last, and then I would be done. So, as we are with personal questions, you're writing so much. How do you decide which questions you follow to? Why do you take this issue and not another one?
It depends how I feel. I wake up and I think, oh, I'm going to do this.
Okay.
Great answer. Are there questions from the audience? Can we pick up on another topic? Yes, over there.
Just start speaking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hello, Jamie. We already met at the Cool Climate Summit, first edition in Copenhagen. I have a question for you. We're a small Belgian producers. We call ourselves natural winemakers, but when is a natural wine for you?
Great question.
Good question. So I quite like the fact that natural wine isn't tightly defined, you know? I think a lot of producers who make natural wine don't put natural on their bottle. They just make wine, you know? And they're making wine according to their beliefs and they feel what is right. So for me, what a natural wine is, it's almost like, I don't quiz people. Like, if someone says to me they're making wines naturally, I'll assume what they mean by that is they're not adding stuff to the wine apart from sulfur dioxide. So they're not acidifying the must, they're not chaptalizing, they're not fining, you know, they might do a light filtration, I think that's okay. But, you know, and I assume that they're using wild ferments as well. And so that for me is like, and I assume that they're not, you know, adding sugar at the end and things like that. But there's a lot to do with the culture of natural wine. There's ways of working. So I'd say alternative élevage is very common in the natural wine world. So I don't see many people in the natural wine world using new small oak, for instance. You know, that's not something people aspire to. They'll often be using large format, or they'll be using used barrels, or they'll be using ceramics, or Kvevery, or Talia, or Tinaja, or whatever, or concrete eggs, or stainless steel, because it's all they've got in the winery. So there's a whole set of things that go along with natural wine, I think. And I think they'll be farming well as well, you know. So for me, that counts as natural wine. But I don't quiz them about what's your total sulfur dioxide level or anything. It's like, you know, I feel like if someone aligns naturally, then I trust them to produce something that's natural.
Thank you so much. I think that's a question the wine world like wraps their heads around.
I think we're too obsessed with it, and I think the only people who want a definition for natural wine are big companies, right? Because big companies, they want the definition. So they say, yeah, well, we're producing 6 million liters of wine a year, but we want to make a natural wine line because we think we'll make some money. So tell us what we need to do to make natural wine, and we'll do it. And it's like, that's not the way it works, guys. You know, if you do this, you kind of have to do your whole production. You can't do like 7 million liters of techno wine and then 500 cases of natural wine. It doesn't kind of work, because if you believe in it, why are you doing it for everything?
Yeah. So for now, we leave the term undefined and love that and embrace that. Any more questions, or otherwise? Oh yes, one last question, and I think then we
have to wrap up. Yes.
Yeah.
Hello. So it's from Schloss Postwitz from the east part of Germany, and we are trying to put our research and technology on wine production. So I have a question for you: that how do you feel, or how do you think about like using the AI in wine production? Because you talk about the robotic and everything that to do the farming and everything.
That's a really so the question. If you didn't hear that, using AI in wine production, I think is. Do you know what I think that's great if you want to do something in terms of wine production that's going to save some money and produce a good result, then that's fine. I don't know exactly how it might work. I mean, you could be monitoring fermentations, you know, you would have direct sort of monitoring of the fermentation curves and everything, and looking at how that's going, or you could be looking at nutrient levels or something. No, I think that, and then knowing what to do and how to respond to the changes in the wine in real time, I think that could be really interesting. You know, I'm all for innovation like that. I think it's really important that, you know, wine is a broad sort of church, you know, and I think it's good that everyone should be talking together and not like, sometimes I know that the natural wine have tried to define themselves by how bad conventional wine is. So this is what, you know, they use 120 additives, they do all this, and it's like, and we're natural. And it's like, no, we don't need that. Let's all get together and cooperate. You know, everyone's got different agendas, different customers. I think it's good to have communication about all these things and to share experiences, even if, you know, for instance, you might not choose to farm or make wine in the same way as other people. You can still have a dialogue, and I think that's really good.
So, thank you very much. Thank you to you, Jamie.